Mam teraz. Powinno być dobrze. Mam nadzieję. Chyba tak.
Słychać Panią.
Dobrze, super. Dobrze. Audio. Jak jesteśmy z czasem? Na czasie wszystko się dzieje, czy nie? Nie bardzo?
Chyba na konferencji chyba tak. No, takie pomoki.
ML System. Zmieniamy świat dla przyszłych pokoleń. Natura to skarb. Dbamy o środowisko. Podejmujemy działania, aby przyszłe pokolenia cieszyły się światem, jaki znamy. Niezbędna jest transformacja energetyczna i my jesteśmy jej częścią. W Centrum Badawczo-Rozwojowym tworzymy innowacje w skali świata. W naszej fabryce produkujemy ogniwa, moduły fotowoltaiczne, systemy mocowań, szyby z powłokami kwantowymi, szyby, które świecą. Fotowoltaiczne żaluzje. Fotowoltaiczne fasady wentylowane. Fotowoltaiczne fasady. Fotowoltaiczne świetliki. Kolorowe moduły fotowoltaiczne. Rozwiązania Smart City. Dostarczamy kompletne rozwiązania systemów fotowoltaicznych zintegrowanych z budynkami. Szyby, które grzeją. Parapety, które grzeją i ładują. Szklane grzejniki. Szyby ze zmienną przeziernością. Chronimy zdrowie. Wirusobójcze przegrody szklane. UV-Box. COVID-detektor. Przyczyniamy się do ochrony planety i ograniczenia efektu cieplarnianego. ML System. Zmieniamy świat dla przyszłych pokoleń.
Michał się nie może połączyć. No, w najgorszym wypadku będziecie panowie dyskutować o geologii.
Możemy szybciej skończyć, też to widziałem, że było to skomplikowane.
No, ale to będzie trochę niefajnie. Kurczę, no. Zadzwonię do niej.
Now I'm unmuted.
We don't hear you, Anna.
Thank you. I don't see Morgan. I hope he got the timing right. It's always so confusing. I sent him like a save the date, and I hope I didn't confuse that. But then there were several emails too, so I'm hoping that. And I cannot find my fun times. How are you, Michelle?
Recording in progress.
So they're asking if they can start. Michelle, if Morgan is not here, then can you start? Can you kind of make the intro? Michelle, if Morgan is not here, can you do the intro? Can you start as the first person?
Well, yes. What do you want me to start with?
Well, I'm gonna do the introduction, kind of a little bit, you know, whatever I found on the IEA website and your testimony, kind of, you know, main things, and then, you know, if that's okay. They're asking us to start now, and hopefully Morgan can join us as we go. We will put him then at the back end.
Yeah, he had to remember that it was 6:30 his time.
I hope I have gave him the right time too. But there were many emails, so I'm really hoping this is the right timing.
Well, he had to get the time zone correct.
Yeah, that's not. I hope
that's the problem. You can send all the emails in the world you want.
Yeah, but I sent a Zoom with my. I hope this was right. Okay, let's ask. They're asking us to start. So either whether we get him or not, you know, I'm hoping for a lot of input from everybody. Roman, Are you there? Oh, I think.
Hello,
yes.
everyone.
Perfect.
I'm here. Nice to see
Perfect.
everyone.
Nice to
You
see
hear
you.
me well?
Perfect. Yes. Yes. So
Oh.
we will start, and hopefully Morgan can join us. We will start with Michelle, and then we go to Roman, and then Andrzej, and then hopefully Morgan will join us. Okay. Super. Perfect.
It is what it is.
Okay, it is what it is. I told them to start, and we hopefully we will have everything lined up at the end. Michelle, you don't have his phone number, do you?
Morgan, no, I don't think.
No,
if I do, it's buried in things.
Yeah, it's probably, unless I can. Oh, Morgan is joining. Oh,
good. Okay.
No. Actually, he needs to join a different meeting. He joined a different meeting. Save the date. Zoom.
I joined from the link that was emailed. Like
I'll send him an email. So he will start and sending you email. We'll see with the correct one. Okay, I will send him that email with the link to, and this should be fine now. This is the forward. Okay, Morgan. Okay. Sent.
Are there people actually on site in Warsaw?
Yes.
Or is this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
In fact, it's in Rzeszów, in southeastern part of Poland, so it's even not.
Yeah.
But all of us are not in Rzeszów.
Right. For this panel, we're all virtual.
Exactly.
Yes.
Correct?
I have another panel tomorrow where I will have one person. One person that's actually in person, and everybody else virtual.
Yeah, and I decided to stay in Warsaw and not go to Rzeszów.
It actually will be easier for the panel for everybody to be virtual. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. So hopefully now we're gonna be all good with that. Yeah, he sent the, yeah.
Hello.
Mm-hmm. Are we on? No.
We still have like 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. I thought this was exactly because it was supposed to start 8. Oh, Morgan's here. Yes.
Hi, Morgan.
Awesome. It's sorry about the confusion. I sent this kind of save the date email, and then the organizers were resending emails with asking for specific timing to join earlier and so on.
Okay, I never got those. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Maybe the email the email ended up kind of putting into the junk folder or something. Might happen.
Yes.
So Morgan, do you want to go first? Is that gonna be okay? I was thinking you, and then Roman, Andrzej, and Michelle. But if you have a preference, is that okay?
No. Yep, that sounds fine.
Super. Thank you. So I will let them know that we're ready to start, because they were asking us a while back to start. I don't know. I kept thinking it was 6. Well, depending on which zone, 30, not 15. The time zones always are killing me. No. Are we? Oh, I think are we on? No, we're not on because that's the studio, right? I got scared that we were on. I'm like, well, nobody told me we are on. Oh, this is crazy.
There's no one interested in Rzeszów about that panel.
I mean, it should be, the studio should be us, right? I mean, I don't understand. Yeah. Nobody has told me.
I think we are on, if the message from the chat is right.
Okay. Okay. So welcome everybody to this panel on critical minerals. I'm very happy here to be at the very least on Zoom with everyone in the audience. I know there is a lot of people in the audience actually in person, which I'm very jealous about every single one of them. And there is some on Zoom as well. So we will start. We have here all the panelists now, and we will talk about critical minerals. All of the panelists have amazing amount of experience in the area, and I hope everybody will enjoy the panel. So just kind of to give an overview of what we're going to talk about for everyone. Demand for minerals associated with clean energy technologies will only grow in the future. As world energy transition pushes for more renewable energy share, critical minerals have garnered more and more attention. We will see a lot of increase in the need for minerals such as copper, cobalt, nickel, lithium, rare earths, and aluminium, and also chromium, zinc, and so on. Some of the demand will increase four times, but sometimes, in fact, as for lithium, 40 times by 2040, it is predicted the demand for lithium will grow. So this is a huge, huge issue that we are bound to face as we go forward with what everybody knows calls energy transition, or basically stepping from the typical fossil fuel run economies to one that increasingly relies on different types of energy, renewable energy, such as wind, solar, and then electricity that's generated through those primary sources of energy. So as we go through the different issues associated with critical minerals, we'll think about what's so critical about it, right? Because that's a big point. Why we talk about critical minerals, and the criticality of minerals can be defined differently. It can be critical because of the issues of demand and supply. If there is not enough supply for the growing demand, that's going to be critical. But then there is also issues of environment, climate, geopolitical security, security of supply, and processing of minerals. All this create a lot of issues that we can call critical. And depending on how person looks from their vantage point, they will see the criticality from the different perspective. So to explore these issues, we have invited a panel, a group of experts and professionals who work in that area for years. So there's a lot of years of experience that we have here connected with currently. We will start with Morgan Bazilian, who's the director of the Payne Institute for Public Policy and professor at the Colorado School of Mines. Previously, he was lead energy specialist at the World Bank and a senior diplomat at the United Nations. He was also the EU's lead negotiator on technology at the UN climate negotiation. We will later move to Roman Opimach, who manages National Upstream Regulator, an agency which supervises the development of mineral resources, issuing all types of exploration and production licenses in Ukraine. Prior to current position, Roman ran the Association of Gas Producers of Ukraine, was advisor to the Minister of Energy of Ukraine, and worked at the Economic Reform Centers mandated by the President of Ukraine. Andrzej Głoszyński will follow. He's a geologist, but by trade, he has worked in the Polish Geological Institute since 2014. And since 2019, he is the Deputy Director for the Geological Survey in the Institute. Michał Foss will close the panel, and that's when we step to some questions. She's the Fellow in Energy, Minerals, and Materials at Rice University's Baker Institute, developing policies and conducting research to build a capacity of non-fuel mineral supply chains. She previously served as the chief energy economist and head of the Bureau of Economic Geology Center for Energy Economics at the University of Texas at Austin. She was also at UH, University of Houston Shell. She was also University of Houston's Shell Interdisciplinary Scholar with grants on North American gas and power integration and national oil companies. I will stop here, and we will move to Morgan for his presentation on the panel.
Anna, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to this panel today. I'm honored to be included in your scientific conference on energy security. The topic of today's panel, as Anna said, is critical minerals, and while it's a topic of growing policy interest, it is largely outside of the public's purview. And given the knowledge and caliber of the other speakers, I'll just keep my intervention concise. I have only 5 points. So as we begin, I think it's especially important to have this kind of conference, this kind of topic at an energy security conference. As the energy system changes globally, as Anna said, it is highly likely that the diversity and demand for minerals is going to increase, and sometimes dramatically. The mineral markets for most of those critical minerals are not transparent. As a result, there are glaring governance issues which need to be addressed. Market development takes decades to develop properly, and we can see that from markets in coal or natural gas or oil. So that continued focus on governance, transparency, and equity is going to be essential, especially in this critical minerals area. Related to those issues, and my second point on market design and governance, the lack of policy price discovery and liquidity in these markets is limiting appropriate investment signals. So this seems evident in some of the gaps we're seeing in the price rises we see recently in some of these minerals, including lithium. That means that because the markets are not functioning in the way they could, that investors are not getting the correct signals to make these long-term, decadal, in other words, very long-term investments. Adding complexity to this is the fact that some of these minerals markets are secondary or tertiary. In other words, you go to look for, you don't go to look for them directly, you get them by looking for other minerals, and that makes it even harder to understand the incentives for these kind of products. The third point, one needs to think about supply chains when considering minerals and metals. There tends to be a focus on mining or the ores, the rock from these minerals, and just thinking of that in that upstream way is limiting. It's also complicated by the fact that there are many different supply chains to keep an eye on. So in the United States, the critical minerals number about 35. The European Union has a different list, but roughly in that same area in the 30s. Japan also has a list roughly in that area. So if you're looking at 30 different supply chains, it makes it very difficult to find. And the data and methodologies to track the investments, the finance, the demand, and the emissions across these chains, supply chains, are increasingly hard to find or overly complicated. Fourth, and I think this is an important one for your conference today, the understanding of the security issues of critical minerals is still nascent. So by that, I mean, you have very sophisticated views on energy security, what energy security means, the complex inputs into security that is not just a supply issue or imports dependence issue, but that it links to politics and social issues, etc. The people at the conference today are very well aware of that. That understanding is not currently in place for critical minerals. So the current methodologies and metrics are somewhat simplistic, and they're too tied, in my view, to a supply side focus. They also blur the bounds between energy and security. And this gets into areas where critical minerals are not critical only for energy markets, but for defense or security markets in the traditional sense of defense and security. Lastly, just to say that this has risen up the priority level in the United States over the last decade. And it seems that the new administration in the US will also take the issue of critical minerals seriously. That said, the main issue for US foreign policy in this area is China. And the United States cannot approach materials or minerals issues in the same way that China does. So it's going to be difficult to compete with those trade agreements, the state-owned enterprises, and some of their investment mechanisms. They also have a huge head start across the supply chain on critical minerals. So in this space, it's just worth noting, at least from the American perspective, that, and I believe from the European perspective, that China is a huge player in these areas. They have a huge head start. And they can ask their industries to make moves that don't necessarily make economic sense or go to places that European or American enterprises might deem too risky. So, Anna, thank you very much for having me today, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Morgan. Let's move to Roman and hear him.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Grzeszów. Nice to see everyone. Hello, Colorado and Texas. I would like to share my presentation to let you materials. Actually, we built the list of over 15 critical minerals. There is over 40 licensed areas. So whereas the licensed company are already operate, and also the unlicensed acreages, over 20, almost 30 proposals. So, and we gathered all of this data and put it in one presentation. So, and translate it in English, create the data room about that, and trying to promote it, trying to explain that Ukraine are open currently for professional investors. We are looking for foreign investors. We are ready to open our potential, geological potential, and again, to build the common value chain. Which of course is important for energy security, it's important for economic security, with defense issue, and so on and so on. How it works, that again, if you will have more time, you can get, following the QR code, the link here, you can get such a material. So this is Atlas with a full description of all of the unlicensed acreages which I mentioned. Titanium is one of that. So among the critical minerals Ukraine currently produce titanium and graphite, as titanium, zirconium, and graphite. Ukraine is one of the 10 leading countries in terms of the proven reserves of titanium. We are in the top 10 countries in terms of the titanium production. There is a bunch of the fields and occurrences in Ukraine which are open again to be explored. Also, it's worth to mention that Ukraine is going to privatize one of the brownfield which are already operate. So it's two fields with the two plants which are produce titanium. It's United Mining Chemical Companies. The privatization process are open and it will finish by the end of October. So we are welcome foreign investors, we are welcome US investors to get a look on it. Actually, there is a very professional team which describe all of the details of such a project. Next, lithium. So we understand the importance of that minerals. Currently, there is no production of lithium in Ukraine. There is one licensed area, and also 3 blocks are open to be auctioned. So it's open to be sold, actually, and open to be explored. Next block, this is rare and rare earth metals. Then it's cobalt, actually, which collected the information about them. Graphite again, just for your information, just recently the Australian, one of the Australian public company, they came on Ukrainian market. They did the M&A deal and merged one of the fabric of graphite production in Ukraine. So they possess right now themselves as the producer of graphite in Europe, which is actually the single one, as I understand. Also, coking coal, it's probably pretty common with Poland. So Ukraine and Poland, one of the biggest producers of coking coal. So far, and Europe demand on import pretty much. So there is a potential to elaborate even common project with Poland and to meet the demand of the European Union on such minerals. Again, following the link, you can download the full observation, full review, or with a guide about the open acreages within the additional information. Also, we launch the virtual data room of geological reports. So far, they are only on the English of original, so in Ukrainian or in Russian language, so the language of legacy reports. But it's open, it's free to use. Actually, everyone can open the virtual data room and download the different reports and look on it and make their own conclusions. Also, we just recently launched the Nadra.gov.ua. This is a website where you can see the special information on a map, actually, where is located the acreages, where located the licenses, not only critical raw materials, but all of the kind, including the oil and gas licenses. And finally, we pretty respect the European requirements in environment requirements. So it's one of the priority to work with the European Union right now. So we are trying to meet the EU communitaires legislation and be friendly as it possible with environment. So there is not, it's not a data production right now. So we are not saying that it's possible to produce something not following the pretty high environment rules in Ukraine. So manage all of this data and meet all of the requirements. Actually, we are waiting the investor who will be able to manage all of such a requirements, environment requirements. I believe that's it. So, and I am ready to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman, for the very interesting presentation. We will move now to Andrzej, who will give us an overview of the Polish side of the geological spectrum.
Okay, hello to everyone. Do you hear me? Yeah, great. So firstly, let me thank you for the invitation and possibility to talk with great colleagues from the United States and from the Ukraine. And as I'm a geologist from degree and from training, I try to focus on the geoscience aspects of the role of geological survey in critical minerals. So let's start with question. With asking a question: is Poland a country rich in critical raw materials? And to answer that questions, I would like to direct you to our publications related to mineral resources. The yearly published balance of documented mineral resources, the mineral resources of Poland, which is in English language, and the balance of prospective mineral deposits, which is also in Polish language. And these compendiums provide comprehensive information about mineral deposits in Poland, and they are located in our website that you can download it directly and look also about and find the information about the tender blocks, the mining heaps database, and other the most valuable information about the mineral resources in Poland. So if you look at the information that Polish Geological Institute provide and develop the largest database related to earth sciences in Poland. More than 650,000 archival documents and circa about 900,000 boxes with drilling cores from the more than 5,500 boreholes are located in our archives right now. And I'm showing you that slide because in the discussion I would like to ask questions related to the geological and geophysical data. So what might be interesting also for you and for maybe for the students from Poland, that right now we are in the process of building a new investment, building the drill core warehouse, which will be located in the center of Poland, and it will have a capacity of 1 million meters of drill cores. And there will be also analytics laboratory building, profiling room, laboratories, conference room. It will be a great place to discuss, to investigate the mineral resources to students, to geoscientists from Poland, but also from abroad. So if you look into the numbers about the energy raw materials in Poland, we can clearly see that we have tremendous resources of coal, of brown coal, lignite, and hard coal. And that two energy raw materials are the primary source of our energy in Poland. It's about 70% of our energy production. So knowing that we have a huge economic resources of coal, and knowing that the green energy transition will have to close that coal mines, it will be a huge challenge for us, for Poland, to establish a new works, a new source of energy to our economy. And if you look at the metallic raw materials documented deposits in Poland, which, as Anna said, will be the most important in the green energy transition, we could see that we have documented deposits of copper and silver in the southwestern part of Poland. We have also documented zinc and lead ore deposits in the southern part of Poland, and some minor deposits of molybdenum, tungsten, copper ore deposits, also the nickel ones and tin ores, which are located in southwestern part of Poland in Sudety Mountains. And if you look into the numbers about the metallic raw materials, we can clearly see that we have tremendous resources of copper and silver ores. And as we know, in the green energy transitions, the copper will be one of the main raw materials in the world. So we hopefully see that this region in Poland related to copper and silver mining industry will be blooming in the coming. For us geologists, there will be also some work in exploration and the documentation of new ore bodies. Let's have a look at the list of the critical minerals for the European Union and for Poland. Honestly, in Poland, we have some terminological chaos about the defining critical minerals. We have different definitions: the strategic, the key, the critical mineral commodities, and based on that, we have provided a list of critical minerals for Poland. And as you can see, it is we have some discrepancies between the European Union Commission list and the list from mineral commodities, the strategic and critical mineral commodities for Poland. In the European Union list, you can see the germanium, hafnium, indium, cobalt, and lithium, and which mineral commodities we don't see in Polish list. And if you look on the right side on the graph, which is the graph showing the scale of national deficit of critical and mineral commodities from the European Union list, we can clearly see that all but one critical minerals deposits are in 100% deficit in Poland. Only coking coal is mainly supplemented from our own resources. And as Roman said, we have some possibilities to cooperate with the Ukrainian side to provide more coking coal for European economy. So what we're supposed to do to secure a critical mineral supply chain for EU and European economy? As a geological survey, of course. So based on all data that we have distinguished and described the prospective deposit areas in Poland. They are mainly located in the southwestern part of Poland and related to copper and silver deposits, but also to other metallic deposits. In southern part where we have zinc and lead deposits, there also we see some perspective in exploration documentation of new ore deposits. We also think that in northeastern part of Poland, we could see the ore bodies, but located at deep subsurface, which are exposed in Finland and Ukraine on the surface. So we think that the East European craton is also quite perspective area for mineral exploration. So what we are doing as a geological survey, of course, we conduct comprehensive studies typical for geological surveys, beginning from verification of drill cores for critical minerals. We provide detailed field and laboratory measurements and gather all the data in documentations. And we conduct the geophysical measurements, interpret them, and try to plan and drill new exploration wells. Last year, we have finished 2 exploration wells in the Lower Silesia related to nickel deposits, and we plan and hope that in the near future we also have possibility to drill new ones in Poland. Here we can see one of our few planned projects related to critical minerals that are related to verification of quantity and quality resources of phosphates, of rare earth elements, the spherosideриtes. We want to also establish the monitoring of exploration and investment activities in the world in terms of scarce resource for Poland. And one of the projects is also to provide exploration for crucial raw materials in Asia, in Mongolia. Maybe just briefly, I will show you another piece of work that we are doing. We are analyzing the current sources of imports, the volume and the type of raw materials being imported. And based on that collected information on current import sources, we are able to estimate whether the supply of a given raw materials is already subject to certain risk at the outset and due to the lack of diversified sources. And to the analyze performance allowed us to identify countries that dominate the import of individual minerals in Poland. And our task and objectives are to assess the risk of these countries, to find alternatives, to gain knowledge that will allow the Institute acts as advisory board for both the administration and private entrepreneurs and in the search for alternatives, following exploration activities in the world and the activity of countries in terms of strategies, opening up to foreign investors, and etc. In that project, we cooperate closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And as a state geological survey, we are establishing international cooperation with geological surveys around the world. From our official information, you can see that we have made and discussed with countries like Mongolia, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and the list is of course longer and includes countries in Asia and Africa. We actively work in Eurogeo surveys organizations, and we are also hopeful to cooperate with Ukraine in exploration and exploitation of critical raw materials, as Roman said, also with the cooking coal. And to finish, another direction in which we are interested in is deep sea mining. Last week, we could read on Payen Institute website that clean energy will drive deep sea mining to become a 100 billion plus industry in 2015, I think. And Poland has a concession blocks on mid-Atlantic ridge, which we suppose is rich in polymetallic nodules. And I won't go into details because it's in early stage of exploration, but hopefully in coming years, we will get more information about the mineral resources in that area. And I think that's all. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Andrzej. This was extremely interesting. I will now move to Michelle, and thank you. Go ahead, Michelle. You muted.
I want to thank Morgan and Roman and Andre for making some excellent comments to get this started. And what I'm going to do is add a few things and then try to pull some themes together for Anna and the group for discussion. First, let me say, I am a Colorado School of Mines alum. I spent time on mining projects early in my career, hard rock metals like lead, zinc, and silver, but also aggregates. Rice University is not a mining engineering school. So when we, as we've embarked on all of this work, we, of course, are partnering with Colorado School of Mines, Missouri Science and Technology, and other schools that still have good mining related programs in the United States. What Rice University really does excel in and is very well known for is materials science and nanotechnology. We have very, very large and active research and development programs in those arenas. And through that, the availability of and the importance of different minerals for different applications really comes to the forefront. So I just wanted to provide that particular context on my background. Years ago, when I was still at the Bureau of Economic Geology at the University of Texas, when I was the chief economist there, I started to revisit the status of affairs in the mining industry in the US and abroad, and looking at different demand for different metals, because we could see that as you shift into new energy applications, new energy technologies, that we would also be creating some incremental demand for some of these materials that might be difficult to source. And I think that's kind of the essence of the problem. As we go into this, we have large competing demands for minerals that are important to consider. And energy is only going to add to that. When you look worldwide over the past few years, the growth in supply of non-fuel minerals actually has been faster than oil and natural gas. So that's a reflection, I think, of how things have shifted. We use more electronics, we're using more advanced communications, we're using more sophisticated materials in the healthcare industries. So we're doing all of these things. Our smartphones and our laptops are intense customers of minerals demand. So we've been pushing up the curve to try to meet supply. And now on top of all of that, what we say that we want to do is move to more materials intense, more minerals intense applications in the energy arena. And the question is going to be how best to do that. I wanted to thank Roman and Andre in particular for their comments, because resource endowments in your part of the world are very strong. I've been to Ukraine. It's a wonderful country, beautiful country. I've never been to Poland. Anna and I are going to try to get there, I hope, together on down the road. And I'm sure that given the scientific and technical traditions in your two countries, that your databases and your data warehouses are very, very good. So I appreciate all the comments that you all made on that. But as you all know, and everyone knows, endowments are one thing. What we have to be able to do is go from endowments, resources in place, the minerals occurrences, to delivered supply and the quality that people need. And that word quality doesn't really get used often enough in all of this. The purity of many of the minerals going into many of the manufacturing applications that we have really matters a lot. The quality of occurrences can impact cost. So lithium is a great example of that. And we're currently using mostly lithium carbonate in our current lithium-based battery chemistries. But we're heading into chemistries in which lithium hydroxide is actually a more enabling form of lithium. Now, what that means for deposits in different countries, the processing that's going to be required, and all of that is of course going to be very much a part of the conversation. We've used the word critical and criticality a lot already in the panel, and one of the problems, of course, is defining what that word actually means, and it means different things to different people. As Morgan pointed out, you can think of it as something that you don't have that you need. So that's kind of a bottom line definition from a national interest point of view. The list of critical minerals that the U.S. Geological Survey has devised largely includes minerals that we don't produce sufficiently in the United States for our own needs. Of course, we don't produce anything in the United States sufficient to meet our own needs. So that makes me, a bit, I guess, broad in terms of how we look at things. I look across the entire periodic table. I don't look at just a few. We do track roughly 39 or so different minerals that have associated problems. So criticality is very much a matter of self-interest when it comes to nation states, when it comes to companies' needs, manufacturers' needs, and other things. And I think we just have to kind of be careful about that. One of the dilemmas is that so much of what is on anyone's critical minerals list doesn't have a price tag. So we know what the price of copper is because it's an internationally traded mineral. We know what the price of iron ore is. We know what the the price of nickel is. But for a lot of the minerals that are of interest, there are no open traded prices. And so one of the points that Morgan made, and I'm sure that in Poland and Ukraine, you would have these opportunities to recover byproducts that are associated with, say, copper or with lead zinc, in order to make the substantial incremental investments of capturing those minerals. It would help to know what the value is in an open, transparent way so that investors can determine whether the cost will eventually be worth it and yield a return. We have lots of examples of this. Tellurium, to try to extract additional tellurium out of copper-based occurrences, gallium from alumina processing. All of those would be a lot easier to do if we could detect what the prices are, if they were openly traded. But for a lot of the smaller, more discrete, more exotic metals, this is difficult to do. The word green mining was put up, and I appreciate you all doing that. There is a lot of pressure on the mining industry, mining and minerals processing, to perform in a way that meets the metrics and expectations that are out there. It's a lot easier to do this when your cost structure is low. I mean, this is going to be true of any endeavor. It's a lot easier to think about doing these things when you're profitable. It's not clear to me that that all of the scrutiny on what we call ESG, environment, society, governance, and all of the demands of manufacturers and extractives industries to meet these expectations necessarily leads to profitability. I mean, it certainly can help with reputations, which will help get deals done, which can help with financing. But the extent to which some of the things that people want to get done can get pushed into the mining domain in a way that doesn't accelerate cost beyond the ability to recapture those costs with the sales of product, that I think is open to debate. I agree with Morgan that, you know, the security issues are not well defined around this, but I think a safe assumption is that we're simply going to be, for a long time, we're going to be trading the security risks that we actually have come to understand fairly well in the oil and gas arena with new risks in the non-fuel minerals arena that are unknown. I think China is a large part of that. But generally speaking, outside of your two countries, most of the occurrences of many of the minerals that we're concerned with, most of the best locations are in very sensitive locations, fragile states, and countries that have governance challenges beyond what we would normally talk about. And I think the US and European Union are both faced with these issues, and it's going to be very interesting to see how these things work out. Rule of thumb, and I think this is what's really interesting for Poland and Ukraine, as we head into some of these very adventurous enterprises, like expanding production of electric vehicles, for instance. The rule of thumb is you want to manufacture the vehicle where the battery manufacturing is located. That would be nice, because then you're not having to pay for all of the logistics of moving battery components around the world. And one of the interesting ideas is to build battery making capacity in your two countries. In particular, Poland has been getting a lot of attention this way, but I don't know why Ukraine couldn't position in a similar fashion if you can provide a stable setting for that kind of investment, and the supporting energy infrastructure, which is the trickiest part. Battery making is not only materials intense, but it's a very energy intense undertaking. One of the reasons why I think a lot of people are looking at Poland is because you have a robust energy system. One of the big questions for Poland's competitiveness is shifting away from your coal-based electrical production into something that I guess will meet expectations of the rest of the European Union. But this is China's problem. Right now, having mapped China's infrastructure, it's on our website, on the Baker Institute website. Anybody can look at that and see the proximity of China's massive electric vehicle battery manufacturing locations relative to its coal-fired power generation. So we like to say, as we joke about it internally, that China is delivering coal-fired power to the electric vehicle industry, in effect. That is one way of thinking about all of this. Not everyone's favorite way, for sure, but that's the harsh reality, that as we go into these things, on balance, how do we do this in a way that is acceptable, and that puts pressure on countries to not only increase minerals production and minerals processing, but do it in a way in which you're also managing emissions. That's a tough order, tall order in all of this. Finally, mining industry capacity. In Poland and Ukraine, you still have mining industries. That's very nice. When I was a student at Colorado School of Mines, I was surrounded by my fellow students, many of whom were looking to embark on careers in the mining industry. I'm betting, Morgan can clarify this, but from my interactions with various friends and colleagues at Colorado School of Mines over the years, that population has dropped in terms of at least American resident students. We certainly, at our mining programs in the United States, benefit from international student enrollment and the ability to, and the willingness to train students from other countries. But our mining industry in the United States is a shadow of what it was when I was a young professional. And there's just no other way to talk about this. In terms of the number of people, capacity, our ability to produce, our ability to go into new projects. We've got governors of states in our country who want to promote electric vehicles and also to ban mining. I think that would probably be unacceptable in Poland and Ukraine, and I hope that it stays that way. People need to understand that if we're going to do these things, then we have to be willing to keep the industry in decent shape. Otherwise, not only are we not going to be able to satisfy the requirements that we have for new energy technologies, we're not going to be able to satisfy the requirements for anything else that we need minerals for. And a final point that didn't come up from anyone, when I look at materials inputs and the integrity of materials supply chains, I'm concerned fundamentally about two things, not just non-fuel minerals and metals, but also plastics and chemicals. And for that, I need hydrocarbons. The bulk of the content of what we make and use is plastics. And we use plastics to substitute for metals, to reduce the weight of things, to provide a lower cost structure, and from everything from refrigerators to the amount of materials content in an electric vehicle, the bulk of that is actually plastics. And if I can't source hydrocarbons for plastics, then all bets are off in my view. And one of the biggest math problems that I have in the way that we're looking at energy around the world today, and the pressure to try to push oil and gas out of the energy mix without thinking about what these molecules provide in terms of chemical precursors for advanced plastics is ridiculous. And yet that's what we're doing. So I wanted to put that on the table as well, because again, I think for your two countries, you have those resources and access to them. You can extract a lot of the same values out of coal. We've looked at coal as a feedstock for materials before. Many, many years, the coal industry has tried to develop viable commercial processes for that. And it may come down to that in order to be able to meet demand. But this is not a small part of the problem. Of all commodities, plastics has been the fastest growing of all commodities, faster than aluminum, faster than steel, faster than copper. Again, because in part it substitutes for those metals. It's more than 60% of the content of an electric vehicle today. It's needed for wind turbine blades that you need for wind turbine projects. And so we have to be able to talk about that in a reasonable way. So Anna, back to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. This was a great overview of what we talked about and how, and I think particularly important and interesting for the audience, the Polish audience, is the ability to use its some countries' comparative advantage in a very creative way, rather than kind of just following everybody's steps. And I think that's exactly what Poland kind of and Ukraine's comparative advantage is, to see what they can do within the endowment they have. Cooperation, being able to cooperate on their acts, but also kind of thinking about where does coal go? And I've written quite a lot on coal and in Poland. So I'm quite invested in that issue, because it is not an easy issue to solve. But as Michelle pointed out, in an extremely interesting way, this is something that can be exploited as an advantage going forward as energy transition is moving forward, and as countries in particularly Western Europe are gravitating to clean jobs and non-mining related jobs, Poland and Ukraine could be the place where these industries develop, because there is such a need for resources and critical minerals and so on. And I have a question from the audience to Morgan and Michelle, which relates to the issue of Afghanistan. What do you think about Afghanistan's rich mineral resources, and if it's realistic to believe that China could benefit from it, invest in infrastructure to extract in the global competition for critical minerals? And I think we even had a couple of email discussions on that issue with Michelle and people from the Baker Institute, right? Kind of there was this issue picked up as soon as we've seen kind of Afghanistan, Taliban taking over Afghanistan. Those questions actually started circulating. So I'm not sure if Morgan or Michelle want to start. Do you want to start, Morgan? Or?
No, let Michelle start. Go ahead.
You're muted, Michelle. Michelle, you're muted.
The geology in the region is certainly attractive. We know that there are minerals occurrences. The USGS had taken a look at Afghanistan some years ago, and that background report is still available on the USGS website for anyone who is interested. However, again, endowments are one thing. Proving that you can extract them in a commercially successful way is another. And I think this would apply even for the Chinese. Of course, from their point of view, this might be a little more compatible with their sphere of interest than it would be, say, for US or European-based companies, or even for Canadian, Australian extractives industries companies, but nevertheless, it's a challenge to launch operations in a country that has had so much instability for so long. But it's part of the Silk Road. I mean, you could think of it that way in terms of what could ultimately happen in the flow of investments. And I'm sure that not just recently, but probably for a long time, the Chinese have thought about Afghanistan that way. And probably, have for some time thought about how to position there. It's not a new issue. It's not a new topic. So we'll just have to see. what can possibly happen. But certainly, it's I'm sure it's of interest. I'm sure it's of interest to them as well as to others.
Morgan, want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with Michelle. I worked in Afghanistan for many years with people on the energy sector, and not only is this not a new issue, it's been, the mineral resources, of course, have been well known for some time, not just because of the USGS either. And that question arising, and it made the newspapers in the US, and I think to a certain extent in Europe, about what's going to happen now with minerals in Afghanistan, that this $1 trillion of resources are now available, is a sort of odd question. In other words, why wouldn't someone have asked that last year, the year before that? So having resources, as we all know, is one helpful piece to producing them, but it's certainly not the only thing needed. So it's a necessary but not sufficient condition, and in this case, a highly not sufficient. So yes, it's on the radar of the Chinese and others in the region. Yes, it will get some funding through the Belt and Road Initiative in some way, but right now I think the focus has to be on supporting the people in Afghanistan, and hopefully not trying to dig up some mineral resources that will allow even more revenues to go to non-governmental groups or groups that do not have appropriate governance in place. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of a red herring question, to be honest, right now.
Thank you, Morgan. And I think to a great extent, all these questions also go to energy security question and how we think about it, and the fact that a lot of countries, as it was mentioned in this panel, which command those resources, are not necessarily very stable, are not necessarily easy to deal with, and because of this, it becomes an issue. But I think because of this, also countries like Poland or Ukraine, which have some of these resources, are becoming critical, kind of to put it that way, for the supply chain, and can express some of the can benefit in terms of pushing forward and being part of the kind of important energy supply chain and generally mineral supply chain going forward. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I don't see anything typed in the chat. Is there anything that other panelists? I know we've communicated with Andrzej, who was asking several questions. Kind of, he was thinking through several questions about. One was about opening the geological and geophysical data, and that can probably also relate to the issues of creating new markets. How can we create a market in critical minerals? We have those issues that are a lot of suppliers, many more minerals than we've ever thought about when we talk about gas and oil, right? This is kind of much easier to think about two things, gas and oil, coal potentially, than now many scores of different minerals that are different in terms of criticality to different countries. But is there something that we can think of, and kind of Roman has pointed to that Ukraine has undertaken steps in privatizing a lot of the activity and auctioning some of the places where minerals can be extracted. Is there something that you think that countries can do to support their position in the critical mineral supply chain? And that's, I'm not sure if anybody wants to take up that question.
Anna, I'm not sure I understand the question.
What would be the
How do you build markets for different minerals?
Yes. So is there a way to support the critical mineral growth and position of a country, which, for example, has copper and so on, to become an important player? What are the steps, and what would be the advice from US perspective, from other type of perspective, from a research perspective, from a practitioner perspective?
Well, for a lot of minerals of interest, a lot of, because we don't have open traded markets, which are going to be very difficult to build for some of the byproducts and co-products that we've been talking about, contract terms will be what they are. So the ability to go in and extract additional amounts of minerals like that will hinge on the commercial agreements that are struck between the producers, post-processing, and the ultimate customers. And that, is something that simply is going to take time. I mean, for someone to make the substantial investment in adding additional capacity to recover tellurium, there has to be a buyer out there with a price that will make the investment work. And so these things, simply will move through a trajectory. There are analogies in other markets for this. I mean, if we just look at oil and natural gas, the world is slowly moving towards more transparency around different natural gas liquids molecules. And we've seen people develop a better understanding of what it costs to isolate methane, ethane, the pentanes, propane, butane, and so on, and slowly get to a point where we have recognizable markets and places where price can be discovered. And it's taken a long time. I mean, for many decades, all of those were simply bundled into the integrated oil and gas supply chains without discrete, at least in the public domain, discrete values. And I would say that, we have to go through a similar process with some of these minerals, which takes decades, which is why a lot of the expectations around the timing of doing, some of the things that we're talking about doing are probably unrealistic. One of the dilemmas, so when you put China on the table, one of the things that you have to include in terms of where their influence extends is in pricing itself. The Chinese interests own the London Metals Exchange, which is one of the major points in the world for discerning values of metals. It happens that Chinese interests control many of the physical warehouse locations where we store ingot and plate and other things. I've seen estimates that Chinese control of physical storage is about 40% of the market. That's pretty high. These are really tough things to talk about when you start getting down to this point of things, this point in the conversation, then having conversations about how metals markets actually really work, who participates in them, and whether you can have confidence in the pricing given this situation. We also, of course, have a lot of influence on metals pricing from some of the dominant producers. So we watched the Indonesians try to influence the price of nickel a couple of years ago. We've had the influence of Congo, which is the largest producer of cobalt, on cobalt pricing. We've had lots of attempts to influence the price of copper. We have these things that add to the complicated mix that ultimately plays into security, supply chain integrity, and other things.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're getting a signal that we are up with time. So I would like to thank you, everybody, for their amazing contributions. It was great to listen to you, hear you, your positions and your presentations. Hopefully, we can meet each other in person sometime soon in Rzeszów next year, hopefully. And thank you very much for being here with us and listening to us. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much. Just the last remark. I'm so sorry.
Sure.
So
of course.
yes, I'm so sorry. So thank you so much again. I would like to propose, if there is any interest from the side of the European or American US investors. So and we can organize a separate webinar and explain what is the potential critical raw materials of Ukraine. I will do it by myself and go through the presentation and say everything about the reserves, about the, again, response of all of the questions actually from your side. So we address to Andrzej, I address to Michelle and Morgan. If there is any interest, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Roman. We will definitely stay in touch. Please take care, everybody. Stay healthy and safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
ML System. Zmieniamy świat dla przyszłych pokoleń. Natura to skarb. Dbamy o środowisko. Podejmujemy działania, aby przyszłe pokolenia cieszyły się światem, jaki znamy. Niezbędna jest transformacja energetyczna i my jesteśmy jej częścią. W Centrum Badawczo-Rozwojowym tworzymy innowacje w skali świata. W naszej fabryce produkujemy ogniwa, moduły fotowoltaiczne, systemy mocowań, szyby z powłokami kwantowymi. Szyby, które świecą. Fotowoltaiczne żaluzje. Fotowoltaiczne fasady wentylowane. Fotowoltaiczne fasady. Fotowoltaiczne świetliki. Kolorowe moduły fotowoltaiczne. Rozwiązania Smart City. Dostarczamy kompletne rozwiązania systemów fotowoltaicznych zintegrowanych z budynkami. Szyby, które grzeją. Parapety, które grzeją i ładują. Szklane grzejniki. Szyby ze zmienną przeziernością. Chronimy zdrowie. Wirusobójcze przegrody szklane. UV-box. COVID-detektor. Przyczyniamy się do ochrony planety i ograniczenia efektu cieplarnianego. ML System. Zmieniamy świat dla przyszłych pokoleń.
Kocham bałtycki wiatr. To ekstra zabawa!
To też moc, którą PGE napędzi morskie farmy wiatrowe.
Bałtycki wiatr rozwija nam żagle.
Rozwinie też naszą gospodarkę, zasilając ponad 5 milionów gospodarstw domowych.
Ten wiatr może dotrzeć wszędzie.
Już niedługo PGE zmieni jego moc w zieloną energię i prześle ją wprost do Ciebie. PGE Polska Grupa Energetyczna. Moc bałtyckiego wiatru w Twoim domu.
Od tysiącleci człowiek odkrywa świat oraz mechanizmy nim rządzące. Napędza nas pragnienie poszerzania wiedzy i lepszego zrozumienia świata. Potrzebna jest do tego odwaga, która pozwala nam docierać tam, gdzie nikt wcześniej nie dotarł. I odpowiedzialność, która sprawia, że naszą wiedzę wykorzystujemy dla wspólnego dobra. Podstawowym obszarem naszej działalności jest wydobycie gazu ziemnego, ropy naftowej oraz sprzedaż tych surowców. Jesteśmy liderem rynku gazu w Polsce, notowanym na GPW. Działamy globalnie. Stale poszerzamy wiedzę, prowadzimy badania i inwestujemy w nowe technologie. Ma to kluczowe znaczenie dla ekspansji i przyszłości naszego przedsiębiorstwa. Jesteśmy wiarygodnym i pewnym dostawcą dla naszych partnerów biznesowych i klientów. Gwarantujemy stałość dostaw i najwyższą jakość produktów. Zapewnia to naszym kontrahentom poczucie bezpieczeństwa i warunki stabilnego rozwoju. Strategia działania PGNiG opiera się przede wszystkim na poszukiwaniu i eksploatacji złóż znajdujących się na terenie kraju i za granicą. Dzięki temu Polska wzmacnia swoją niezależność energetyczną. Chcąc dywersyfikować źródła pozyskiwania surowców, importujemy gaz z rynków zagranicznych. Istotna część przyszłych dostaw będzie pochodzić z Ameryki Północnej. Poszukujemy i eksploatujemy złoża ropy naftowej i gazu ziemnego na norweskim szelfie kontynentalnym, a także w Pakistanie i innych częściach świata. Całość tych działań sprawia, że jesteśmy kluczowym gwarantem bezpieczeństwa energetycznego Polski. Gaz ziemny jest najlepszym rozwiązaniem dla każdego przedsiębiorstwa, które pragnie działać w zgodzie ze środowiskiem naturalnym. Wykorzystując zasoby ukryte w naszej ziemi, troszczymy się jednocześnie o przyszłe pokolenia. Naszym celem jest ciągły rozwój i dostarczanie efektywnych rozwiązań energetycznych. To dzięki temu jesteśmy dzisiaj obecni niemal w każdym polskim domu. PGNiG. Odkrywamy przyjazną energię.
Energia elektryczna towarzyszy nam w każdej chwili życia. Za stały i bezpieczny przesył energii elektrycznej w całej Polsce oraz bilansowanie krajowego systemu elektroenergetycznego odpowiadają pracownicy polskich sieci elektroenergetycznych. Energii elektrycznej nie da się przechowywać, dlatego w każdej chwili należy produkować jej dokładnie tyle, ile zostanie zużyte. Oszacowanie zapotrzebowania na energię elektryczną i jej bilansowanie to jedno z najtrudniejszych i najważniejszych wyzwań, z którymi polskie sieci elektroenergetyczne mierzą się każdego dnia. Nasza sieć to ponad 14 600 km linii 220 i 400 kV. Wraz z dynamicznym wzrostem zapotrzebowania na energię elektryczną rozwijamy sieć elektroenergetyczną, by sprostać wyzwaniom nadchodzącym w kolejnych dziesięcioleciach. Przy wszystkich naszych inwestycjach minimalizujemy wpływ na środowisko naturalne i otoczenie. Wspieramy społeczności lokalne i naszych sąsiadów. W naszych prognozach dotyczących zapotrzebowania i popytu uwzględniamy zmiany zachodzące na rynku energii. Wyprzedzamy je, aby zapewnić bezpieczeństwo energetyczne naszego kraju. Bierzemy aktywny udział w transformacji energetycznej Europy. Jesteśmy częścią jednolitego, zintegrowanego europejskiego rynku energii elektrycznej. Krajowy system elektroenergetyczny jest szczególnie ważny dla bezpieczeństwa państwa. Dlatego przykładamy ogromną wagę do fizycznej ochrony naszej infrastruktury i cyberbezpieczeństwa systemów. Polskie sieci elektroenergetyczne realnie wpływają na polską gospodarkę. Polskie sieci elektroenergetyczne. Energia w dobrych rękach.
Życie to energia. Być może nie zastanawiałeś się, skąd się bierze, jaką drogę musi przebyć. Ale dzięki nam masz pewność, że zawsze będzie tam, gdzie jej potrzebujesz. Już od ponad 15 lat Gaz-System zarządza siecią przesyłową w Polsce. Zapewniamy bezpieczeństwo i ciągłość dostaw. Co roku przesyłamy miliardy metrów sześciennych gazu. Stale rozwijamy się, budując tysiące kilometrów nowych gazociągów. Współtworzymy zintegrowane systemy przesyłowe w Europie, dzięki takim projektom jak dwukierunkowy gazociąg łączący Polskę i Danię, korytarz północ-południe czy interkonektory. Będąc filarem bezpieczeństwa energetycznego kraju i regionu, rozwijamy inwestycje umożliwiające dostawy gazu z nowych źródeł i kierunków. Rozbudowujemy terminal LNG w Świnoujściu. Jesteśmy też odpowiedzialni za powstanie terminalu pływającego w Zatoce Gdańskiej. Zatrudniamy ponad 3000 pracowników, których łączy pasja i profesjonalizm w dostarczaniu czystej, konkurencyjnej cenowo i stabilnej energii. Dążymy do zrównoważonego rozwoju, wspierając lokalne społeczności i chroniąc środowisko. A ponad wszystko zmieniamy oblicze polskiego gazownictwa oraz integrujemy rynek gazu w Europie. Gaz-System. System, który łączy.
Polska Spółka Gazownictwa to największa spółka grupy kapitałowej PGNiG. Jako narodowy operator systemu dystrybucyjnego i europejski lider tej branży, przez prawie 200 000 kilometrów gazociągów codziennie dostarczamy gaz do ponad 7 milionów odbiorców. Stale czuwamy nad bezpieczeństwem i ciągłością jego dostaw. Chcemy, by z błękitnego paliwa korzystało jeszcze więcej mieszkańców Polski, dlatego realizujemy strategiczny program rozbudowy infrastruktury dystrybucyjnej.
Inwestujemy w tworzenie nowych gazociągów, rozwijamy nowoczesne technologie i podnosimy efektywność podejmowanych działań.
Stawiamy także na gazyfikację wyspową. Dzięki stacjom regazyfikacji skroplonego gazu LNG zapewniamy szybki i bezpieczny dostęp do tego paliwa tam, gdzie go wcześniej nie było. Dzięki naszym działaniom wzrasta liczba odbiorców gazu, a proces przyłączenia do sieci dystrybucyjnej PSG jest łatwiejszy niż kiedykolwiek wcześniej.
Wystarczy zgłosić się do jednego z prawie 200 miejsc obsługi klienta w całym kraju lub skorzystać z internetowego portalu przyłączeniowego.
Polska Spółka Gazownictwa. Dostarczamy paliwo gazowe w sposób ciągły, bezpieczny, z poszanowaniem środowiska naturalnego. Polska Spółka Gazownictwa. Wybieram gaz.
I don't know. Are we starting already? Could I have a signal, please, from the organizers who hopefully are watching us? Yes, okay. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to welcome you on the panel on energy security of NATO's eastern flank countries in the context of the Russian Federation policy. My name is Agata Roskot-Strachota. I work for OSW, Center for Eastern Studies, where I deal with energy issues. And I am replacing Mr. Julian Wieczorkiewicz, who could not join us due to other urgent commitments, quite sudden. I want to welcome our distinguished panelists today. Mr. Benjamin Schmidt is postdoctoral research fellow and project development scientist at Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Previously, he was with State Department. Mr. Frank Umbach, head of research at European Cluster for Climate, Energy and Resource Security at the University of Bonn, and also research director at European Centre for Energy and Resource Security at King's College London. Mr. Jan Okciu is political and security analyst at Comprehensive Crisis and Operation Management Center at Supreme Headquarters of Allied Powers Europe at NATO, and he previously was with Energy Charter Secretariat. Mr. Szymon Kardaś works for OSW, that is Center for Eastern Studies, where he's a senior fellow at Russian department, and he works also at the Faculty of Political Science and International Studies of the University of Warsaw. And last but not least, Mr. Dominik Jankowski is head of political section and Polish delegation to NATO, and previously worked for MFA. As you all know, EU is focused recently on its green agenda, so energy security questions have been less pronounced in recent years. Yet, current situation on gas markets proves they are still important, and they have also remained crucial for Central and East European countries, NATO Eastern Flank countries. With Turk Stream now on stream, with Nord Stream 2 pipeline construction completed, with uncertainty related to long-term transit via Ukraine, volatility on global gas markets, and recently record high prices of both gas and energy in Europe and beyond. Role of Russia and its energy resources and energy policy remains important when it comes to energy security of the region of Europe. And there are questions if Russian influence has decreased. What are the main challenges related to Russia policy, and if and how can we respond to them? Is there a role, and if so, which, for NATO in addressing these challenges? So these are questions that I would like to ask our distinguished panelists. Each of them will have up to 10 minutes for their remarks, and then I hope for some discussion and questions and comments from the public. So Benjamin, please, could you start?
Thank you so much, Agata, and thank you everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces and friends. I'm sure others are in the audience in person. I regret that I couldn't make it to Poland today. Really would have wanted to, but we're, I think, getting closer to international travel here at Harvard, but not quite there for normal travel. So, as Agata said, energy security remains paramount in European national security considerations, and I don't think that it has to be talking about the green energy future that we need to strive for in terms of combating global climate change. I think that it has to be part of that. I think energy security needs to be part of that. The transition needs to be planned out. And I think that, I'd like to frame these remarks in terms of an article that came out in the Financial Times just this morning, and I'll just read a quote from the article that is in reference to Russia's almost historic lack of sending gas supplies, additional gas supplies for European storages so far this year. And this is the quote. Russian President Vladimir Putin said last week that high gas prices in Europe, as well as the undersupply of the storages, were partly a consequence of, quote, smart Alex in the European Commission, who had pushed for, quote, market-based pricing, an apparent dig at the EU efforts to increase competition in gas markets where Russia dominates supplies. I think that is a telling remark. And I think it is because I think that we actually need even more smart Alex involved in creating a more energy resilient, energy secure Europe when we're looking at the sort of challenges that the European community faces today. Because when we're looking at these challenges, I often look at them across 5 different pillars. When I was in the State Department, I always try to frame it in 5 energy security pillars. And they are as follows. So it's security of sources, routes, and fuel types. And of course, that means infrastructure diversification. It's not just where you're getting your gas from. It's also how you're getting your gas, how you're getting your electricity, how you're getting your renewables in terms of your supply chains for critical technologies or rare earths and all this sort of supply chain considerations in terms of advanced technologies. So we have to have infrastructure diversification. The EU has stepped up to the plate since I started at the State Department back in 2015 with the European Energy Union concept and with the specific plan to diversify European energy infrastructure away from over-dominance and over-reliance on Russian critical energy infrastructure, in particular gas, but also electricity grid infrastructure. So that's number 1. Number 2, second pillar is if you're looking at the infrastructure, that first pillar is as the hardware, the second pillar would be its software, and that means market liberalization rules. We've seen the third energy package be challenged again and again and again by Gazprom in particular in the context of Nord Stream 2. And again and again and again, the third energy package and market liberalization prevails. I think that needs to continue to happen. The market liberalization has taken great strides. And Poland, of course, in particular, has been a leader at being involved in these legal challenges that have been successful at holding Russia to account for monopolistic behaviors and attempting to subvert the market liberalization regulations that the EU has set forth in its agenda. So that means we need to have more ownership unbundling, more third-party access, more transparency, more transparent tariff rates, et cetera, to make sure that all of that diversified infrastructure is operating in a way that is according to market liberalization rules for the 21st century. You can have all of those things in those first 2 pillars, but if you don't have physical and cybersecurity of energy infrastructure, which is the third pillar, those first 2 don't really matter. We saw this earlier this year with the pipeline hack and ransomware in the United States, where you saw a major fuel pipeline be cyber attacked. And it doesn't matter how diversified and how market liberalized a piece of infrastructure is, if it's actually shut down by physical or cybersecurity threats, you're basically having a situation where you have a statue. Okay? You don't have energy infrastructure, you have a statue. That's not good. The fourth, and this is really key for NATO, and this is something I've talked about with my NATO colleagues in Brussels, both inside and outside of government for many years, has been the interoperability and the energy security for military fuel supply chains in particular, but also grid infrastructure reliance and all these sort of things. We really need more energy resiliency to be part of the central discussion at NATO, and I think it has become so over the years. The amount of events and roundtables that have taken place, both at the NATO plenary as well as in working groups, has really exploded, and that's a great thing. And that's a testament to basically looking over the horizon from what was once the The NATO pipeline network in Western Europe is kind of the holistic infrastructure example of NATO's focus on energy security, has now gone and looked at this in terms of NATO's eastern flank as well. I think more needs to be done. I think that the interconnectedness of energy infrastructure that was part of NATO's dedicated supply chains back in the Soviet era, the Cold War era, needs to continue to be expanded and integrated through Central and Eastern Europe. The NATO pipeline network, again, still ends at the Fulda Gap in eastern former border between East and West Germany. So that needs to continue to be part of this. And then finally is kind of a catch-all that we've seen increase over the past several years, in particular over the past half decade, which is the need to look at how energy has been weaponized from as a disinformation platform and as a platform for elite capture and strategic corruption across the NATO alliance. And I think we see this very clearly with projects like Nord Stream 2, where Gerhard Schroeder, the former chancellor of Germany, approved the project while in office, stepped out, and just a few weeks later became a senior board member for Nord Stream 1 at the time, AG, and has continued to become one of Vladimir Putin's key Trojan horses, with all due respect to the Trojans, because this Trojan horse concept, because this really is not disguised at all. So he's serving on also the Rosneft board. We've seen the former Austrian foreign minister, Karen Kneissel, have Putin at her wedding, have pro-Russia policies while in office, step out, first work for RT as a commentator on Nord Stream 2 issues in particular, and then just earlier this year become nominated and then take a board seat at Russian state-controlled oil company Rosneft. We saw Francois Fillon, the former French prime minister, become have pro-Russia policies in office, and then step out and eventually, after a corruption scandal, got picked up earlier this year to be the representative of the Russian Federation for a hydrocarbon trading group that is state-owned by Russia. So the list goes on and on and on. I saw a number of tweets over the weekend about concerns that a former Dutch minister is now taking a job that includes lobbying, being part of a lobby group for Gazprom. So these issues are transboundary. These issues are central to the concerns that are related to Nord Stream 2, that are related to Russia's energy activities in Europe. But I think we need to think more broadly on this, because I think that when we look at the key areas that Washington and Brussels need to jointly address going forward, it's not just on these individual projects. Those are incredibly important. And US and European opposition to Nord Stream 2 is vital and continues to be vital with or without this agreement that was announced earlier this summer between the Biden administration and the Merkel administration, which I'm sure we'll talk about more as this conference goes on. But we need to stop looking at all of these critical infrastructure issues as individual debates. So whether it's the debate over Huawei with Beijing, or the debate over 5G, or the debate over Nord Stream 2 and Russia's use of energy in Europe, these all need to have a more cohesive policy and a cohesive response by both the transatlantic community writ large and NATO in particular. Because there has been this trend of economic deals in emerging technologies to challenge Western liberal democratic. This is where I can put my science hat back on. I think personally that it's vital that we need to develop a multidisciplinary policy response, that critical analysis with the use of science and technology analysis, countermeasures. It's more important than ever for Washington to rally a transatlantic coalition of officials and experts of diverse backgrounds and disciplinary focus, including moving science and technology to the center of our collective foreign policy and national security process. And that means having commissioners of science and technology in this discussion as well. So that's really what we're looking at on that front. I think that in terms of the Nord Stream deal, that I don't think that it addresses the core national security concerns that are related to Nord Stream 2. Active participation of those most threatened by the project, in particular Poland and Ukraine. And it looks like I have some disruptions in my connection. So I will leave it there, and we can take the discussion.
Okay, thank you a lot, Ben, for a very interesting presentation. Indeed, there were some small disruptions in the connection, but I think we mostly understood what you were saying. Right now, Mr. Frank Umbach, could you please take the floor?
Yes, I try to prepare some slides, and I hope you can see that and to follow my argumentation. When I was actually thinking or preparing my presentation, I was had to focus on. Normally, I could also take a broader issue on focusing on cybersecurity challenges, traditional energy security dimension, but also new ones. But I decided to focus in my short statement rather on the Nord Stream issue still, because in my humble opinion, it's not a finished issue. It has implications, strategic wider implications. It has also new dimensions, which are, from my point of view, too much overlooked. Benjamin may correct me when I refer to the US debates, where I think a number of issues are completely left, but partly also in Europe. And let me begin the bilateral US-German agreement itself confirms that the pipeline is not just a commercial project, even not for the German government, obviously, as a commercial agreement only does not need a political agreement to support it. What strikes me, which was somehow surprising, maybe on the other hand not, that the word of the truce agreement is very vague diplomatically. And if you read it carefully, you ask yourself whether it obliges, whether it commits Germany to any real political actions. I agree with Benjamin what he's just saying, that the bilateral NS deal is unlikely to address Ukraine's core security problem without offering here red lines. For me, the agreement could have been an important instrument to outline very clear red lines which Russia cannot step over. That agreement does not offer that. Interestingly, also, when the agreement had been worked out in the final weeks and then being published, the German government did not comment at all to Putin's new and unusual Ukraine paper, which had been widely commented in Brussels, US, in the EU member states, which have clearly questioned Ukraine's statehood and make it dependent on the Kremlin's goodwill. Equally, the political repression during the last weeks, actually, in Russia, on lawyers, on Navalny supporters, and many others, even on political foundations, including foreign ones, have been unprecedented. The political repression has dramatically increased, actually, during the last weeks. And given all these things, and the third one was, of course, the third factor was that Russia stopped the seasonal deliveries of natural gas for the winter time. And I'm coming back in a minute to that. Again, you have seen no comment at all by the German government on these issues. What has been overlooked, this is specifically what I wanted also to ask maybe Benjamin and of course all the other participants, is there's that the Nord Stream issue has created, it's not an issue just for delivering natural gas. If the pipeline will begin operating, let's say at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, it can never be profitable. Yeah, a pipeline like this is being planned by being operated at full capacity over the next 20, 30 years to become profitable. Not to speak about the huge investments Russia did for the new gas fields in Yamal and building 3,000 kilometers of new pipelines and compressor stations to St. Petersburg before the gas can be channeled in to the Nord Stream pipeline. So, and then by taking into account the new, the European Green Deal and its impact by the year 2030, which envisages even by 2030 a decline of the European gas consumption by approximately 20%. Otherwise, the target of minus 55% cannot be achieved. So by taking these factors into account, it becomes very clear that the pipeline can never be profitable until it will be filled by hydrogen afterwards, after 2030. Otherwise, it cannot be profitable. And that's the background why the German gas companies, as well as Gazprom, have been in cooperation of hydrogen projects. So I'm wondering that the Nord Stream pipeline in the slide has also created a new pathway dependence of green gas transport into the future. It's not just natural gas. It's actually hydrogen. Otherwise, the pipeline will not be profitable. And up to now, we don't have any kind of debates, actually, neither in Brussels, nor in the transatlantic realm, nor in Germany itself, by creating a new dependencies on hydrogen imports from Russia, on which Germany and the EU will rely on. Yeah, just to give a figure why we need to talk about hydrogen imports and new dependencies. If you take the German electricity production during the last years, it was a little bit less than 600 terawatt hours per year. Yeah, the future long-term demand for hydrogen will need a volume of approximately 1,500 gigawatt hours, which is almost 3 times of the entire German electricity production. When you will address the hard-to-abate sectors such as the European energy intensive industry. So that's the recognition when you're looking in the hydrogen strategies of Germany and the EU, where clearly it has been stated that there's a huge need for imports of hydrogen. And against this background, in bringing into the context of Nord Stream 2, the German gas industry is already cooperating, is already negotiating with Gazprom on future hydrogen projects. So, and we don't have any discussion. So my big fear is that the gas industry is creating a fait accompli, as they did it with the Nord Stream issue, and then presented to the politicians that everything has already been negotiated and we have constructed here everything, and it's just up to the political side to agree. Yeah, this is a very similar tactic. The creating Nord Stream just focusing on the natural gas transport, as the US did in the truce agreement, is completely, in my view, completely half side of the story, yeah, and missing here important implications also on the commercial side. It creates, of course, problems for Gazprom, and the certification process is still ongoing. Will take for the next months, whereas the third-party access will be extremely interested to be watched, because that boils down to the profitability of the pipeline. Yeah. So here's something where I have seen nothing, as I said, in the light of the negotiations between Germany and the US, where the US has raised this issue of future hydrogen exports using the Nord Stream pipeline. So that means that the issue of Nord Stream has not gone. It has very far-reaching implications far beyond 2030. And we don't talk about these things. And of course, there is not very much interest, at least not at the present German government, to openly discuss those interests. The other question where I'm wondering is, the German side was arguing and was committing itself, and I think this is a progress, that the German government would be willing to enforce new sanctions. The question remains, what kind of sanctions we're speaking about? Yeah, is the EU then deterring the Putin regime with sanctions as we have done it in the past by sanctionized individuals, which is actually not very deterring. There's even a joke in Moscow for those who had not been sanctioned personally, which creates rather mistrust in Russia of not being sanctioned so far. Yeah. So what kind of sanctions we speaking about? And the deep irony here is that for the contradicting German policies, yeah, we have argued for years this is a commercial project. This is just a project between Germany and Russia, more or less, with some other European companies being involved. Yeah, but if something goes wrong and Russia is not behaving as we are hoping for, then we turn to the EU and then having an EU debate on sanctions. Yeah, this is ridiculous. Yeah, you favor a bilateral bilateral project, and if something goes wrong, then go to the EU and calling for political solidarity in addressing common sanctions. But here again, I think what there's a real this agreement looks for me like an invitation rather for Putin. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that sooner or later, when a new German government is in place, which might be not the case until the end of the year or the beginning of next year, Putin will certainly test it. And then we will have indeed a debate about sanctions. And even if the EU would come to some kind of agreement of sanctions, Putin has already achieved, by testing the political solidarity both within the EU, within the transatlantic framework, but also within the political solidarity within the German Bundestag between the political parties. And he will certainly achieve its goal, even if we would agree on sanctions, by weakening the further national EU and transatlantic solidarity by any new forthcoming debates about those sanctions. Because that's part of Russia's hybrid strategy, weakening the political solidarity in the major EU countries such as Germany, within the EU, between its member states, as well as within the transatlantic relations. So then looking to the analysis of Merkel's Moscow and Kiev visits, of course, during the last years, Germany has supported again an extension of an Ukrainian transit of gas deliveries to Europe and Germany. That could be expected. But given that Nord Stream 2 is circumventing pipeline as other pipelines, I don't think that Russia has an interest at all. If you're looking to the Russian pipelines on the Russian territory reaching the Ukrainian border, this pipeline network has not been modernized at all. And it's actually been deconstructed now. So if at best you will have maybe reserve capacity of 10 to 20 billion cubic meters for seasonal gas supplies during the summertime, or for times like repairing the Nord Stream pipeline, which I have regularly to do, then you can still use such a low capacity of the Ukrainian transit. But 10 to 20 billion cubic meters is commercially for Ukraine certainly not profitable. And I don't think that the German government is in the position to push this issue through in Moscow by persuading Putin to have 30, 40 or even higher billion cubic meters of volume still being transported through Ukraine after 2024. And even the reserve capacity of 10 to 20 billion cubic meters can be easily displaced by Russia by the already growing annual LNG exports to Europe, which are also growing for some time. So I don't think, I don't see that this is a realistic option. And given the domestic criticism and maybe also the criticism of the wording of the bilateral agreement between Germany and the US, now the Biden administration has appointed a special envoy for the NS2 agreement for the full implementation on the German side, which should obviously pressure the president and maybe the new German government to do more concrete actions in the months and years ahead. So that brings me finally to the point, who are the winners of the deal? Clearly, Russia and the Kremlin have succeeded with the pipeline exports, the convention strategy. But they are uncertain, of course, to look what will be the next government in Berlin, particularly if the Green Party will be involved with its outspoken critic of Nord Stream 2. And that's also the background why Russia stopped the supply of gas now during the last weeks for the gas storage, because it wanted to be sure that also the certification process goes ahead as fast as possible before a new German government, which might be more critical to Nord Stream, enters the political arena. Is Germany really the winner, as is sometimes portrayed? I think only at a first glance, Germany is benefiting economically, commercially, by becoming the most important gas hub at the expense of other transit states, be it Ukraine, be it Poland, be it Slovakia. In this respect, it can be seen as a winner. But if you take the foreign policy field implications into account, then obviously Germany is certainly not a winner. Yeah, you can only argue that Germany is a winner as long as economic issues are completely separated from foreign policy applications.
Frank, excuse me, we are a bit running out of time.
Okay, then I stop here. I think the big losers, as I said, are the EU energy policies, the EU political solidarity, as well as the German-US transatlantic relations. And again, for me, Germany is certainly not a winner of this deal.
Yes, thank you. Maybe in the comments and questions section, we'll talk about losers and winners, if there are some of this situation beside Russia, of course. And now I would like to ask Mr. Can Okcu to take floor. And Jan, as there will be your presentation shown, please say if you need the slides to be changed.
Thank you very much, Agata. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Frank. Great inputs. Great to learn from you always on future forecasts and what's planned for NS2. From our perspective, of course, at NATO, for everyone, we don't work on energy, of course, but as Frank pointed out clearly, energy impacts us all, and particularly in our security environments. I can't see my slides right now. I don't know if they put them there. Next picture. No, we're still on Frank's presentation.
I'm sorry, I have to go off here. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, now it should work.
All right. So for NATO, of course, we went through challenges with Frank for Europe, but our main focus at NATO, of course, is the challenges stemming from Russia's energy policy, which incline us to be worried about what energy dominance for Russia, for its economic and political gains, to our detriment as an alliance. I can't see my slides, so I'll just continue, Agata.
Okay, I'll ask administrator to help us. So this is your slide, main challenges stemming from Russia's energy policy on. Yeah.
I think we don't hear Ken. He has not opened his microphone.
All right. Thank you very much, Agata. Thanks. Great, Frank. So I was talking to myself while referring to you. So let's get back to basics. So I was saying NATO, we don't work on energy, of course. You're all experts in this area, but it's important to us because, as you highlighted, we cannot detach energy geopolitics from our security environment. And it impacts us. How? Because basically, NATO is very worried about Russia's energy dominance that is being created one way or another. We're all involved. And this energy dominance for Russia's economic and political gains may become, as we've experienced in the past with Ukraine over the past decades, to our detriment. So as an alliance, we're concerned. Over 45% of Europe's annual oil and gas demand is supplied by Russia. This is an important dependency that Europe is aware of for the past 2 decades at least, and is trying to wear off. And as Frank pointed out, Nord Stream 2 project runs counter to this politically, maybe not economically. When you look at China, for example, you see a very balanced energy mix in terms of dependencies to sources and countries. We criticize China on many aspects, but in a way, Europe fails to learn from China or to have such a balanced mix. And this over-dependency is continuing. And this is very, very controversial because we also have the European Green Deal, as you know. So we're committed to decarbonization, to waving off Russian oil and gas, but fossil fuels in general. And Nord Stream 2 also runs against our own agenda in the long term, because as you know, energy infrastructure is there to last for many, many decades to come. It's very expensive, and we don't see that going away and benefiting our interests as an alliance for our climate change agenda in the next decades to come. And this growing dependency of fossil fuels to Russia, which is not going away, but possibly being reinforced through Nord Stream 2, creates an energy security risk. As I mentioned, to the detriment of our climate change agenda as an alliance. On top of that, we've seen, the Ukrainian president and Merkel referred to the weaponization of energy by Russia for its own political gains in the future. So this is something that we have to watch closely. We have to listen to you very closely and put that more on the radar amongst our allies, because all of this not only impacts our energy security environment, our environment and climate change mitigation agenda and efforts, but it also impacts the political stability, economic stability of our partners, including our members, NATO allies, increasing their vulnerability through this dependency. So next picture, I want to look at what to do. What are our options? Because of course we're worried, we criticize, we have different projects on the way that we scrutinize over the years. We talk about Nord Stream 2 in every conference for the past 10 years, but in the end, boom, we have the pipeline, it's done, and now we have to think of what to do with this $10 billion dollar investment. We're not gonna let it, buried under the sea. We have to find a solution. While we did not act to find alternatives, if I may, what did Europe do to offer itself another alternative to these pipelines that Russia is building? This year, 2 pipelines were inaugurated, as you know, the Turk Stream from the south and the Nord Stream from the north. So we're talking about a new encirclement, if you want, of Europe with new infrastructure from Russia, fossil fuels based, anchored infrastructure, pipelines, which last, centuries, as you know, from Soviet times, we have experience. So we have been imposed a bit this picture, and we are kind of prisoners of these infrastructure because we could not perhaps come up with other solutions. Are they other solutions? Of course, we work on promoting and supporting our allies on building new LNG terminals like Pignic's infrastructure in Poland, or LNG terminal being built in the Adriatic Sea and in Ukraine. Of course, this is not a radical solution to our problems. It's part of it, just like how renewables is, how energy efficiency is, nuclear energy perhaps. But of course, while we phase out nuclear energy, whether it's in Germany or in Belgium, we haven't found a solution. So we sort of perhaps rely on the easy solution that is already offered to us on a plate by Gazprom, financing their pipelines, building them, and offering to us all of that on a platter in a very fast way, while we cannot work it out between ourselves over many years of talks and plans and papers. New routes, of course, are part of the solution. TANAP was opened. This is, of course, good news. But again, here we see Russia and its influence in the Caucasus, as you have seen between Azerbaijan and Armenia's conflict in Northern Karabakh. Now with peacekeeping forces there, even there in non-Russian resources, Russia has an influence, if I may say, in Caspian resources in the Caucasus. And TANAP is not an alternative to Nord Stream 2. We don't have the same volumes, and it still has its vulnerabilities. But in the long term, it's an important alternative pipeline. And when we look at North Africa, for example, on the map, we see the same issue and the same problematic area for the alliance, where we have alternative resources, but in very unstable and problematic countries, where Russia, again, is present, whether we talk about the Wagner private security group in Libya, whether we talk about Russia's nuclear investments plans in Egypt and in Algeria, their economic ties. And on top of this, we have to be aware that even in non-Russian resources, we see Russia very present in geographies like North Africa, the Caucasus, in Iraq, northern Iraq, where Rosneft has gas fields. So we need to monitor this well and put it on the map of the radar for the alliance. But of course, NATO is also about protection. So we work on energy security through protection of critical energy infrastructure, whether it's from pipelines to LNG terminals, power stations, to protect them also against cyber attacks, not only physical attacks. And planning recently, NATO has more and more incorporated energy security, as you know, in its military planning also in scenarios, to help the alliance be aware more and more about those risks. Next picture, to get into a more, let's say, detailed focal example for everyone. You will see that in terms of logistics in the Baltics, which may be more relevant for this conference, you see questions that we have to ask ourselves. And what do we actually do? We talk a lot, and we try to address issues like Nord Stream 2, which is already built in there, but in where we can actually act, that we still have insufficient actions, perhaps, in addressing energy security in regions like in the Baltics now, where there is a lack of oil product pipeline network. It's arguable whether the military fuel storage capacities are enough in the Baltics, even though they may be sufficient for civilian use. Rail transportation options between Poland and Lithuania, their effectiveness, we have to think about. And again, the electricity supply vulnerability, which was there in the Baltics, where in recent years, interconnection, synchronization with the EU, of course, has begun, is underway, and is good for the alliance's energy security. But we still have to work out other vulnerabilities linked to also military in the Baltic Sea, which also impact energy security, since the construction of Nord Stream 2, where Russia might be increasing its naval presence for civilian use. Thanks very much, Agata. Happy to answer any questions from everyone. That's it for me. Next picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, John. And right now, I would ask Mr. Szymon Kardaś to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you very much, Agata. Thank you everyone to all of you. Very interesting presentations. And actually, a lot has been said with respect to issues related to Nord Stream 2 and its impact. So I will try to add a couple of points to what was mentioned so far. First of all, I would like to address some consequences of Nord Stream 2 that are already on the table, and something that of course we as Europeans, or actually we as members of the transatlantic community, would have to deal with in the future as well. First of all, of course, I mean, the main political impact of Nord Stream 2 is the huge rift that appeared, I mean, within the European Union with respect to energy policy issues, and something that would be really difficult to let's say, to address. I mean, taking into account different interests that we have. On the one hand, the Central European countries, or Central and Eastern European countries, and their interest and interest of countries like Germany, like Austria, which support the Nord Stream 2 agenda and are in and support the cooperation with Russia, and are interested in the development of stronger ties when it comes to energy relations in Russia, not only in terms of, I mean, using the Nord Stream 2 for gas deliveries, but also, as was mentioned so far, for cooperation in such perspective sectors as for instance, hydrogen cooperation. So we have, I mean, we have a problem, I mean, inside Europe, but an added value of Nord Stream 2 for Russia, and I believe that the Kremlin did not expect that such kind of a consequence appears, is that we have a rift in transatlantic relations, and this rift was, of course, visible during the Trump administration, and a hotspot that Nord Stream 2 became in relations between Berlin and Washington during Trump's era. And now, I mean, when the Biden's administration came, the Nord Stream 2 issue became a problem in relations between Washington and Central European countries, which are, of course, dissatisfied with this shift that appeared in US policy towards Nord Stream 2. Of course, we know that, I mean, the general political position remains the same, but on the other hand, I mean, the new administration, of course, is less willing to introduce some more serious measures with respect to the project, and of course the truth that Frank was addressing more in details is also an illustration of some kind of a shift that appeared in this respect. The second point, I mean, when we address some general political implications and something that plays in favor of Russia, is that for Russia, I mean, the construction of Nord Stream 2 and construction of other pipelines that they managed to build since 2014 is an occasion to demonstrate that, well, I mean, sanctions or generally some political measures that are being taken against Russia have limited impact. Because, well, we talk a lot about Nord Stream 2, but actually, I mean, during the last 7 years, Russia managed to build 3 export pipelines. I mean, 2 that were addressed at the European market, Turk Stream and Nord Stream 2. But also we should not forget about the power of Siberia. I mean, the first gas pipeline that was opened in December 2019. Moreover, I mean, it was just mentioned the LNG potential, but Russia is also developing its LNG potential very, very quickly. I mean, the Yamal LNG export terminal that was commissioned in 2018 is the biggest export terminal in Russia right now and one of the biggest in the world in general, and it's operating at full capacity, which on the one hand was designed to address the needs of the Asian markets, but actually, I mean, when it comes to figures, it occurs that significant volumes of LNG are being exported to the European market. And another project is on its way. I mean, the Arctic LNG 2 export terminal that is being developed by Novatek together with the French company Total, together with Chinese companies, together with Japanese companies, which is also, I mean, something that of course increases the chances of this project to be successful in the future. So actually, I mean, when we take into account, I mean, all the achievements that happened during an extremely difficult times for Russia politically, yeah, I mean, taking into account the political tensions that we have in relations between Russia and the West, it's really something. And I think that for Russia is extremely important to demonstrate that sanctions have limited impact. And this is some kind of a political consequence that is a good news for Russia and not such a good news, I mean, for us as the West. And now speaking a little bit about the future, I mean, what kind of challenges are on the table when the Nord Stream 2 is built and we are waiting for the commissioning of the pipeline. The first thing that of course we need to think of is that Russia will definitely use those new pipelines, I mean Nord Stream 2 and Turk Stream, to decrease the level of dependence on third countries which were used as routes for export of Russian natural gas. So it would definitely have an impact on Ukraine. But we should not forget that it might also have an impact on Poland, because one of the important gas pipelines is running through Belarus and Poland. I mean, the Yamal Europe pipeline. So we pay much attention to Ukraine, but actually we cannot exclude that Russia might also be willing to decrease the volumes of gas that are being shipped through that particular route. And actually, Gazprom is already sending some signals in this respect. They avoid booking the long-term capacities, the one-year capacities at the Yamal Europe pipeline in summer this year. So it's a clear signal that well, they will take the advantage of having more routes available right now. Secondly, when we talk about Central Europe, of course, it would have an impact on future projects which are aimed at the diversification of sources of supply. It would definitely have an impact on the flows of natural gas in this part of Europe. Agata actually wrote an excellent piece, about this consequence. So I'm referring to the paper that you can find on the OSW website. And finally, of course, we cannot exclude that Russia will try to take the advantage of Nord Stream 2 in order to take a more harsh stance in its policy towards Ukraine. Because on the one hand, of course, President Putin is not excluding, he stated it numerous times that, well, we actually want to continue the transit through Ukraine, but I mean, it needs to be based on the commercial, let's say, on conditions which are commercially acceptable from Moscow's point of view. But actually, he also sent some signals that, well, Russia would be willing to continue the transit through Ukraine when Ukraine changes its position towards Russia. So they may use it as a kind of a political leverage in order to gain some political concessions from Kiev, and of course having Nord Stream 2 and Turk Stream as new pipelines, they can definitely use it as a leverage. And the final point, because I know that we are running out of time and it would be good to leave some time for the discussion. I mean, the final point and the final challenge that I see, it was partly addressed by my distinguished colleagues. This is the challenge for the EU regulations. I mean, something that is one of the key instruments that we have on the European side vis-a-vis Russia. And that's why it's strategically important. I mean, to pay attention to the way that the EU law is implemented regarding Nord Stream 2, but also regarding other pipelines that are being used by Russia, and all the legal tools that we have, because they proved to be effective couple of times in recent years, and it seems like Russia would try to use Nord Stream 2 to undermine the regulations that we have in the European Union. Yeah, we know that. I mean, the first steps that they took when the gas directive was amended, they filed a complaint against the directive to the European Court of Justice. Then they also filed a complaint into the arbitration tribunal in order to undermine, I mean, the directive that was adopted. They were trying to gain exemptions from the directive with respect to Nord Stream 2, which of course so far appeared to be ineffective. But those steps that were taken are another illustration that Russia's goal is not only to, I mean, maintain its influence on the market, but also to undermine one of the few effective instruments that we have on our side when we are dealing in energy issues with Russia. And this is something that we need to pay attention to, and we need to focus on, let's say, securing the instrument, which is extremely important when it comes to our toolkit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Szymon. And right now our last speaker, Mr. Dominik Jankowski, and after that I hope for short section of questions and answers. Mr. Jankowski, please take the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I'll try to be brief, as I see we are approaching the end of the discussion soon. I think we've discussed Nord Stream 2. I'll skip that element. I'll try to concentrate on the bits and pieces that we see here in NATO HQ. So three pillars or three elements for your consideration, thinking about Russian energy policy and NATO. First, there is no doubt that Russia uses political or coercive manipulation of energy against allies, and I think, despite the Nord Stream 2 challenge, I think there is a growing understanding among allies that Russia will not shy away of using that energy manipulation, energy weapon against allies. It's important as we are, and I'm going to flag it, going to work on the next NATO strategic concept. So a crucial document which is going to somehow portray NATO's action in the next decade, or give a guidance. I think it's important not to forget that this is how Russia is going to act within the next decade, also against allies. Which leads me to my second point. My second point is, and we have said it also, or agreed to it at the Brussels summit in June 2021, that we will ensure reliable energy supplies to our military forces. This is what NATO is doing. NATO is about the military elements, deterrence and defense. And I want to flag one issue. Of course, everyone was talking about our dependence on gas coming from the Russian Federation. There is another element of that equation, which is our dependence on oil. I think fuel supplies to our militaries, they also must be independent from an unreliable partner and a challenger of the Euro-Atlantic security, which is Russia. Therefore, we have started some time ago to strategize how we can enhance and enlarge the NATO pipeline system, a system which is designed to distribute jet fuel throughout, currently mainly Western Europe and some allies, but also in order to enhance the eastern flank of NATO, we are currently working on the military requirements for any potential extension of that pipeline or building a separate pipeline in our region. And this could be done in conjunction with other projects and other initiatives that we are thinking about, including Free Seas initiatives and thinking how to interconnect the region in energy security terms. I think it's important because we are still thinking in times of peace, which is good. That's what we should be doing, but we should be prepared for any potential crisis/conflict with the Russian Federation, and our inability to act militarily in case of cutting off the fuel supplies from Russia towards some allies is going to have an impact on the credibility of deterrence and defense of NATO. Third point, I want to refer to what Frank Umbach said about Russia using hydrogen and potentially in the future through Nord Stream 2. I think that's one of the elements that we need to closely monitor Russia, and leads me to my third pillar of what we should be doing or observing and working on in NATO. The climate change and impact of climate change on security agenda, which is an agenda of growing importance here in this house in NATO. That leads me to two elements that I want to mention. First, of course, some allies are already ready to have this dialogue with Russia on how to jointly mitigate the climate change effects on security, which is interconnected, of course, with energy policy and how Russia sees its energy leverage throughout the energy transition that we are going to face in the EU. Second, of course, Russia is going to be potentially to some extent at least, it will be benefiting from climate change. It will open up resources in the north. It will give them some to a lesser extent, they will be consuming energy due to climate change. So I think we need to factor that in our thinking about how Russia is potentially going to misuse our climate change / net zero discussion in its favor, and calculate that also in our approach to building a sustainable energy security on NATO's eastern flank. And I will give it back to the moderator, as I think it's good if we have some comments and questions potentially throughout the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Jankowski. So after hearing all excellent presentations, right now it's time for questions, comments from the public. If there are some, please let us know. And if not, I would ask also my panelists to comment or add something. I know, for example, that I very unpolitely interrupted Mr. Umbach, and I know that he has some questions that he wanted to pose to all of us. So please, Frank, could you finish what I disturbed you with?
No, I think I was already finished. I just wanted to highlight a little bit the strategic perspective of Nord Stream 2, and that's not just related to natural gas. And we have a very strange situation, actually, because on one hand, in the light of the European Green Deal and the Fit 55 program and the target for by the year 2030, there's a very heated and hotly debated issue whether natural gas has even a future, whether it can still get funding of the European Green Deal, because it's perceived by NGOs and the Green parties in the European Parliament as a fossil fuel. And the policies have been over the last year to stop all fossil fuel investments at all, which includes natural gas. And so nuclear power as well as natural gas had been very much questionized from the NGO side, from the climate perspective. And there is indeed also a huge issue, and that's the methane emissions, where the EU is introducing a regulation in addressing the things. And we do have here indeed also a global problem. CO2 emissions in 2020 went down, decreased by almost 5% as a result of the global pandemic. But the methane emissions globally increased at a record since we measure methane emissions. I think that goes back to the 1980s. Yeah, so methane emissions worldwide have dramatically increased. And there is a permafrost melting on the Russian side, which is also now being addressed, or at least more openly discussed. And even Putin, since last year, has admitted officially that the warming of the permafrost region is taking place 3 times as fast as the global warming. And that raises huge costs for the infrastructure, which is being destroyed by methane emissions, etc. And here you have an interesting interlink, because the melting of the Russian permafrost region is, of course, the direct result of the global warming, but it is also the result, as the Russian climate experts have analyzed for years, a debate which has completely been blocked for the public by the Kremlin, that the melting is also the result of the new oil and gas fields in the Arctic and the permafrost region. So it's the result of the local oil and gas production. Yeah, so you have a global problem of addressing methane emission, which is also a big issue, by the way, in the US, very controversially discussed by reintroducing the old Obama regulations, and also maybe placing even a tax here, etc. But it's clear methane emissions are up to 80 times more dangerous than CO2 emissions. There is obviously a climate problem here, which you have to address. And bringing down methane emissions by the oil and gas industry is a low-hanging fruit. And so the pressure in the next months will dramatically increase in this direction, also being seen on the Glasgow summit. Yeah, and here again, what we strangely, there is of course an interlink, yeah, between the Nord Stream pipeline issue and the Russian, the melting of the Russian permafrost, because it's being fed by gas from the Yamal region, which is also contributing to Russia's methane emissions as a result of the permafrost melting, which might be result in volumes which itself is so huge, as climate experts predicted, that this itself can change the global climate by itself. So you have a global issue, you have a European issue of climate issues, which are still interlinked also with the Nord Stream pipeline and Yamal and the oil and gas production. If you look into the Russia's energy strategy, which came out last year, then you know that Russia's future is still in expanding oil and gas production, as well as by becoming actually the largest exporter of coal in the next years. So here again, we have another big contradiction to the official EU policies and the policies ahead with the Glasgow summit, where we obviously need, of course, a cooperation or a dialogue between EU and Russia. But it's also clear from the domestic discussion between climate experts in Russia and energy experts in the Kremlin, that climate issue can now be addressed, needs to be addressed, because it's an economic cost factor every year, which is raising costs every year tremendously. for the infrastructure being built in the permafrost region. But itself, it's also an issue where clear limits can be seen for such a discussions, because those discussions do not have to threaten the oil and gas production in Yamal and the permafrost region, because that's the economic foundation of Russia. And here again, there are a number of issues with interlinks which we need to discuss. We need to discuss it with the Russians, but we have also to make clear for ourselves where we want to go ahead with our climate policies, and whether natural gas itself has a future beyond 2030. And this is a debate where maybe we don't have a big disagreement here in the session, but in Brussels, this is very much still on the table. So on the table is the question whether natural gas has at all a future in on the European market beyond 2030.
Thank you, thank you. And as you said, that Russia is still focused on oil and gas, and with its Nord Stream 2 project, it also focuses on like sustaining the partnership with European countries like Germany, and the dependency on natural gas or blue hydrogen. If I understand you correctly, you see Russian policy as a challenge also to implementation of European climate policy goals. But we may also wonder if energy transition and climate policy in Europe, globally, if it's not also a challenge to Russia and to its strategic energy goals. So this is one question that I wanted to pose. And then the other is, what are the lessons learned from Nord Stream 2? Of course, it's not a finished story. It's still ongoing and developing. But still, I think that we could have learned some lessons as NATO, as Europe, when it comes, for example, to regulation. Should it be focused on filling the holes, or should it be forward-looking, looking in the future, how to regulate green gases, or how to regulate the energy supplies of the future? So I just wanted you to have a chance for a brief summary and maybe answering some of these questions for the end, but really, really brief. Each one of you has just 1 minute. And if, Ben, you have still 1 minute, I would start with you, because I know that you need to leave soon.
Well, thanks so much, Agata, and thanks so much to all the speakers. This was very interesting and I think an important discussion to have right now as we transition to the phase of looking at energy security in Europe, in which Nord Stream 2 is physically constructed and physically complete, but has not yet come into operation. I think that over the next months and perhaps years, there are going to be ongoing protracted legal discussions on whatever schemes that Gazprom is trying to advance in order to either get around EU regulation or appear to look like it is complying with EU regulation, even though de facto it is trying to skirt those possibilities. I would say that this recent announcement by the Russian Federation that perhaps Rosneft might be able to partner with Gazprom in order to take 10 BCMA or some percentage of the capacity of Nord Stream 2 in order to send its gas through to Europe, which on one hand could potentially start to break up the Gazprom's export monopoly to the EU in terms of piped natural gas. But on the other hand, already on its face, looks like it could potentially be running afoul of EU regulatory rules in the sense of setting up what would de facto be a non-competitive and potentially violating EU third energy package gas cartel, in which instead of having an open free market auction for gas capacity to allow for third-party access, this was a priori decided between two Russian Kremlin-controlled state-owned enterprises So I think that's something we need to look at in the future. I think this concept of having a virtual gas trading hub on the Baltic seabed, in which Gazprom would basically own and operate about 90% of the pipeline, and the last 15 nautical miles in the German territorial sea could potentially be sold to another company, is again a way that Gazprom could try to get compliance with the third energy package, but in fact would potentially present a legal fiction for this, in which you'd have a single continuous piece of infrastructure operating under two legal regimes. So these are things that we need to be looking for. This group of experts is well suited to do so. I think NATO has a great team put together that looks at these issues, and of course the EU does as well. So this is a to be continued. It's not the end of the story by any measure. I think that we're going to be dealing with the effects of Nord Stream in either a regulatory or security side for years to come. So let's get ready to keep this dialogue going. And thanks everyone. I have to run, but thank you so much for a great conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So now I would ask Mr. Jankowski to have a short final remarks.
Yeah, but I'll try to be super brief as we are already over time. I think one of the lessons that we should draw from our inability to stop Nord Stream 2 is an element that we are missing also in our bigger discussion about energy security here in Europe, which is a necessity to have a closer NATO-EU cooperation and transatlantic cooperation, meaning US-EU cooperation energy. I think both links are either non-existent, like NATO-EU cooperation on energy security, or they were weakened in the last years. So I think if we also concentrate on that, draw some lessons learned from the Nord Stream 2, this might be helpful for us to move forward and to be better prepared and more resilient towards the Russian challenges and threats in energy sphere. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Szymon. Take the floor now, please.
Okay, so speaking of lessons learned, I think that, well, the most important thing is the principle of solidarity, which was so much, let's say, underlined and strengthened in recent rulings of the European Court of Justice. I think that we should, take it as a kind of a foundation for the new stage of discussion regarding what should the solidarity principle mean in terms of energy policy, in terms of energy cooperation, the goals of energy policy, and the mechanisms of cooperation within the framework of EU energy policy. And this is something that is a kind of a homework that needs to be done, inside Europe, because basically, the EU is the legal empire, yeah, as some people, a normative power, as many people say. So we have to use the tools that we have in order to address challenges that were mentioned by my colleagues and in this discussion. Secondly, when it comes to the future, I think that all the options that refer to some changes that Russia would be willing to introduce inside are less probable, because this is the last option that they will use. They will start with all the options that are aimed at undermining our rules, our principles, so challenging the EU regulations, and only if they do not have any other option, they will take the adaptive approach. So I'm not expecting that Russia will change its national legal system and grant Rosneft the right to export gas through pipelines, because it would have a huge impact on the internal balance between companies and different groups of interest inside Russia. And Kremlin avoided, significant changes in this respect so far. So I'm not expecting new changes right now. And besides, Rosneft does not have enough potential right now. They were planning to extract around 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas in 2020. And they were, in 2020, actually, their output was a little bit more than 60 billion cubic meters. So, well, it's ends the discussion, at least so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Szymon. And now, last but not least, Frank, could you please say something for
I agree with my previous colleagues. Just want to mention that despite my own criticism at the German-US Nord Stream 2 deal, the good side of the coin is certainly that the US and Germany are committed still to discuss and to negotiate on the issues, and also how Russia is behaving. So that forces us to a closer transatlantic relations, closer certainly than it was possible under the Trump administration. And at the core of all these debates, whether that's the transatlantic relationship, whether that's the EU policies, is indeed the issue of political solidarity. There's no doubt. Any kind of political association or alliance, the core principle, the core issue has always been political solidarity. And that's something which we still have to learn in Germany. You cannot expect political solidarity in the refugee crisis or on other issues when Germany, as the largest and biggest member, the most powerful within the EU, is not living up that political solidarity as a model for all other questions. You cannot expect that from weaker and smaller EU member states. The bigger one has to go ahead. And if we don't do that, then no real EU common energy and climate policies or EU integration will go forward.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the public. And right now I close this panel. Bye-bye.
Many thanks for the moderation, perfect moderation. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
ML System. Zmieniamy świat dla przyszłych pokoleń. Natura to skarb. Dbamy o środowisko. Podejmujemy działania, aby przyszłe pokolenia cieszyły się światem, jaki znamy. Niezbędna jest transformacja energetyczna i my jesteśmy jej częścią. W Centrum Badawczo-Rozwojowym tworzymy innowacje w skali świata. W naszej fabryce produkujemy ogniwa, moduły fotowoltaiczne, systemy mocowań, szyby z powłokami kwantowymi, szyby, które świecą. Fotowoltaiczne żaluzje. Fotowoltaiczne fasady wentylowane. Fotowoltaiczne fasady. Fotowoltaiczne świetliki. Kolorowe moduły fotowoltaiczne. Rozwiązania Smart City. Dostarczamy kompletne rozwiązania systemów fotowoltaicznych zintegrowanych z budynkami. Szyby, które grzeją. Parapety, które grzeją i ładują. szklane grzejniki. Szyby ze zmienną przeziernością. Chronimy zdrowie. Wirusobójcze przegrody szklane. UV-Box. COVID-detektor. Przyczyniamy się do ochrony planety i ograniczenia efektu cieplarnianego. ML System. Zmieniamy świat dla przyszłych pokoleń.
Kocham bałtycki wiatr.
To ekstra zabawa!
To też moc, którą PGE napędzi morskie farmy wiatrowe.
Bałtycki wiatr rozwija nam żagle.
Rozwinie też naszą gospodarkę, zasilając ponad 5 milionów gospodarstw domowych.
Ten wiatr może dotrzeć wszędzie.
Już niedługo PGE zmieni jego moc w zieloną energię i prześle ją wprost do Ciebie. PGE Polska Grupa Energetyczna. Moc bałtyckiego wiatru w Twoim domu.
Od tysiącleci człowiek odkrywa świat oraz mechanizmy nim rządzące. Napędza nas pragnienie poszerzania wiedzy i lepszego zrozumienia świata. Potrzebna jest do tego odwaga, która pozwala nam docierać tam, gdzie nikt wcześniej nie dotarł. I odpowiedzialność, która sprawia, że naszą wiedzę wykorzystujemy dla wspólnego dobra. Podstawowym obszarem naszej działalności jest wydobycie gazu ziemnego, ropy naftowej oraz sprzedaż tych surowców. Jesteśmy liderem rynku gazu w Polsce, notowanym na GPW. Działamy globalnie. Stale poszerzamy wiedzę, prowadzimy badania i inwestujemy w nowe technologie. Ma to kluczowe znaczenie dla ekspansji i przyszłości naszego przedsiębiorstwa. Jesteśmy wiarygodnym i pewnym dostawcą dla naszych partnerów biznesowych i klientów. Gwarantujemy stałość dostaw i najwyższą jakość produktów. Zapewnia to naszym kontrahentom poczucie bezpieczeństwa i warunki stabilnego rozwoju. Strategia działania PGNiG opiera się przede wszystkim na poszukiwaniu i eksploatacji złóż znajdujących się na terenie kraju i za granicą. Dzięki temu Polska wzmacnia swoją niezależność energetyczną. Chcąc dywersyfikować źródła pozyskiwania surowców, importujemy gaz z rynków zagranicznych. Istotna część przyszłych dostaw będzie pochodzić z Ameryki Północnej. Poszukujemy i eksploatujemy złoża ropy naftowej i gazu ziemnego na norweskim szelfie kontynentalnym, a także w Pakistanie i innych częściach świata. Całość tych działań sprawia, że jesteśmy kluczowym gwarantem bezpieczeństwa energetycznego Polski. Gaz ziemny jest najlepszym rozwiązaniem dla każdego przedsiębiorstwa, które pragnie działać w zgodzie ze środowiskiem naturalnym. Wykorzystując zasoby ukryte w naszej ziemi, troszczymy się jednocześnie o przyszłe pokolenia. Naszym celem jest ciągły rozwój i dostarczanie efektywnych rozwiązań energetycznych. To dzięki temu jesteśmy dzisiaj obecni niemal w każdym polskim domu. PGNiG. Odkrywamy przyjazną energię.
Energia elektryczna towarzyszy nam w każdej chwili życia. Za stały i bezpieczny przesył energii elektrycznej w całej Polsce oraz bilansowanie krajowego systemu elektroenergetycznego odpowiadają pracownicy polskich sieci elektroenergetycznych. Energii elektrycznej nie da się przechowywać, dlatego w każdej chwili należy produkować jej dokładnie tyle, ile zostanie zużyte. Oszacowanie zapotrzebowania na energię elektryczną i jej bilansowanie to jedno z najtrudniejszych i najważniejszych wyzwań, z którymi polskie sieci elektroenergetyczne mierzą się każdego dnia. Nasza sieć to ponad 14 600 km linii 220 i 400 kV. Wraz z dynamicznym wzrostem zapotrzebowania na energię elektryczną rozwijamy sieć elektroenergetyczną, by sprostać wyzwaniom nadchodzącym w kolejnych dziesięcioleciach. Przy wszystkich naszych inwestycjach minimalizujemy wpływ na środowisko naturalne i otoczenie. Wspieramy społeczności lokalne i naszych sąsiadów. W naszych prognozach dotyczących zapotrzebowania i popytu uwzględniamy zmiany zachodzące na rynku energii. Wyprzedzamy je, aby zapewnić bezpieczeństwo energetyczne naszego kraju. Bierzemy aktywny udział w transformacji energetycznej Europy. Jesteśmy częścią jednolitego, zintegrowanego europejskiego rynku energii elektrycznej. Krajowy system elektroenergetyczny jest szczególnie ważny dla bezpieczeństwa państwa. Dlatego przykładamy ogromną wagę do fizycznej ochrony naszej infrastruktury i cyberbezpieczeństwa systemów. Polskie sieci elektroenergetyczne realnie wpływają na polską gospodarkę. Polskie sieci elektroenergetyczne. Energia w dobrych rękach.
Życie to energia. Być może nie zastanawiałeś się, skąd się bierze, jaką drogę musi przebyć, ale dzięki nam masz pewność, że zawsze będzie tam, gdzie jej potrzebujesz. Już od ponad 15 lat Gaz-System zarządza siecią przesyłową w Polsce. Zapewniamy bezpieczeństwo i ciągłość dostaw. Co roku przesyłamy miliardy metrów sześciennych gazu. Stale rozwijamy się, budując tysiące kilometrów nowych gazociągów. Współtworzymy zintegrowane systemy przesyłowe w Europie, dzięki takim projektom jak dwukierunkowy gazociąg łączący Polskę i Danię, korytarz północ-południe czy interkonektory. Będąc filarem bezpieczeństwa energetycznego kraju i regionu, rozwijamy inwestycje umożliwiające dostawy gazu z nowych źródeł i kierunków. Rozbudowujemy terminal LNG w Świnoujściu. Jesteśmy też odpowiedzialni za powstanie terminalu pływającego w Zatoce Gdańskiej. Zatrudniamy ponad 3000 pracowników, których łączy pasja i profesjonalizm w dostarczaniu czystej, konkurencyjnej cenowo i stabilnej energii. Dążymy do zrównoważonego rozwoju, wspierając lokalne społeczności i chroniąc środowisko. A ponad wszystko zmieniamy oblicze polskiego gazownictwa oraz integrujemy rynek gazu w Europie. Gaz-System. System, który łączy.
Polska Spółka Gazownictwa to największa spółka grupy kapitałowej PGNiG. Jako narodowy operator systemu dystrybucyjnego i europejski lider tej branży, przez prawie 200 000 kilometrów gazociągów codziennie dostarczamy gaz do ponad 7 milionów odbiorców. Stale czuwamy nad bezpieczeństwem i ciągłością jego dostaw. Chcemy, by z błękitnego paliwa korzystało jeszcze więcej mieszkańców Polski, dlatego realizujemy strategiczny program rozbudowy infrastruktury dystrybucyjnej.
Inwestujemy w tworzenie nowych gazociągów, rozwijamy nowoczesne technologie i podnosimy efektywność podejmowanych działań.
Stawiamy także na gazyfikację wyspową. Dzięki stacjom regazyfikacji skroplonego gazu LNG zapewniamy szybki i bezpieczny dostęp do tego paliwa tam, gdzie go wcześniej nie było. Dzięki naszym działaniom wzrasta liczba odbiorców gazu, a proces przyłączenia do sieci dystrybucyjnej PSG jest łatwiejszy niż kiedykolwiek wcześniej.
Wystarczy zgłosić się do jednego z prawie 200 miejsc obsługi klienta w całym kraju lub skorzystać z internetowego portalu przyłączeniowego.
Polska Spółka Gazownictwa. Dostarczamy paliwo gazowe w sposób ciągły, bezpieczny, z poszanowaniem środowiska naturalnego. Polska Spółka Gazownictwa. Wybieram gaz.
Energy gives power. Telecommunications gives connection. Banking gives stability. Big data gives knowledge. Smart city gives new possibilities. Healthcare gives strength. Insurance gives safety. Administration gives support. Defense gives security. IT gives freedom. ASECO, technology for business, solutions for people.